Hello friends, how are you all? So I am here with a lecture discussing about the essay paper of Civil Services Examination 2022. This is part 1 of the lecture. There will be one or two more parts to explain about the various topics of essay paper. So first observation, what is the first observation looking at the paper? If we see the topics which are given were easy to comprehend compared if we compare it with the previous year's papers, last 2 years paper, it was easy to comprehend the topics, but it doesn't mean that paper was easy. To understand one topic and to write 1000 to 1200 words on that topic is a different task. So first of all, the observation is that if you have in-depth knowledge of things, like if you know the impact of poets across the historiography that you have read from different books. If you have read that there were so many poets across the different era and what impact they had made, so if this kind of information you have and you have the ample writing practice to connect the dots, what happens in while writing essay, you will have 10 to 12 um, areas which you will identify while drawing a rough sketch in the initial 10 to 15 minutes. From those 10 to 12 rough dimensions, you will make a good essay. For that, you need to have a good writing ability, an ability to connect the dots, different dimensions with the current context, writing examples, making it interesting. So for all these, you need good amount of practice. There is no substitute to practice. If you have good writing skill, if you have good English, whatever you have, if you won't practice, nothing will happen. So let's first discuss one by one essays. I will be discussing two essays in this video. More essays will be discussed in the later videos. So first essay topic is history is a series of victories won by the scientific man over the romantic man. So what does it mean? If we look the history of mankind, we can observe that there was a kind of change of phase from one era to another era. You would have heard about a society where there was master and slaves. That is the human beings, Homo sapiens, who had designed small weapons, small tools, made initially from the stone and then made from the wood. They became the master of the society, and the rest became the slaves. So a kind of organization was made because of a certain human being's ability to reason, to invent, to think rationally. So this shows the importance of reasoning. Now, if I have to give introduction, you can give some anecdote. If you have read book Homo sapiens, which is a very fantastic book, you can easily cite an anecdote from that book, or simply define history. History is what? Something which chronologically record uh, s- significant events, which changes the course of how society functions, or any other definition. So you can simply define history as well. Also, history goes through several phases with a battle between conflicting ideology, which subsequently leads to one idea triumphing over other. Triumph of one idea over other is the way society goes from one era to another. Hegel had said that a dialectical he had given that there is a thesis and then there is an antithesis which makes a synthesis. Say, for example, there was an Indian system of education, then there was a British system of education. When both converged, there became a modern system of education in India, which is a mix of both. A synthesis became. Scientific ideas based on rationality most often are seen to triumph over romantic ideas because of having more realism in it. They are more realistic in their approach. Whereas romantic ideas is something which is imaginary most of the time, which is not real, which is not something which can be replicated. They are living in their own imaginary world. How a society governs through realism. Also, scientific men are ahead of their times. If you see what Galileo Galilei used to say at that point of time, was something which was seen as fast at that particular period, but it was later understood that what Galileo Galilei had said was correct. Now, if we talk about in body what we can write, so you can take a temporal scale. What I mean by temporal scale, that is, you can take a historical approach. You can talk about first ancient world history, and then you can talk about the medieval, and the modern, and the current times. So this is one of the ways which you can write this essay, or you can take a pastel approach. You can take different dimensions: political, economic, social, and you have to connect one stanza with the another. So, if we see use of fire or weapons by early men led to triumph of scientific men, and scientific men became master and others became slave. Civilizations like Harappan, which were more scientific in nature, flourished more than the contemporary civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, or any other civilization of that time. Because Harappan civilization was based on scientific methods, methods of town planning, agriculture, and other, um, even the political governance of Harappan civilization was ahead of its time. If you had read a story of conquest of Acharya Chanakya over the mighty Nanda dynasty, when his father was imprisoned and then he died, Chanak, then this ruler of Nanda became all sorts of atrocities was committed by that particular ruler. He disrespected Acharya Chanakya in front of the whole court. And how this man with the vision, with the scientific temperament, he organized different things. He made a master plan. He organized his defense, and through that he had beaten the mighty Nanda dynasty. Also, Socrates opposed the orthodoxy that was prevalent in the society. He had to drink poison, but his ideas became prevalent across the world. Even now, we read the thoughts of Socrates. Similarly, conquest of Islamic invaders. If you have read the story of Prithviraj Chauhan, he was the one who was strictly aligned to ethos, ethics, and uh, the behavior of Rajputs, that we do not attack a man who do not have any kind of weapon in hand. But on the other hand, if you see Mahmud of Ghazni, he was more of a realist in nature. He came, he after a defeat, and he used every kind of strategy which he could have used, and he avenged his defeat. Similarly, we see the conquest of Mughals. They used gunpowder weapons, and their win was made possible because the other rulers were more romantic in their approach, that we have God with our kingdom. But here, Mughals were more realistic in their approach. Now we see the social reforms that were brought by some of the poets like Kabir Das or Namdev or Guru Nanak. They were more scientific in their approach. They were using the realist approach. They were opposing the caste system. They were trying to reform the religion. However, the romantic poets who used to even glorify the dogmas of the religion, so they were more scientific in approach, and which was leading to orthodoxy in the society, and they were trying to break that orthodoxy that was prevalent in the society. If we see the Europeans, if we see the conquest of Columbus or Vasco da Gama, they were using the advanced navigation technology and the enormous wealth that was generated through the Industrial Revolution. So they used this enormous wealth, they used the navigation technology to defeat Turks as well as the several local rulers. So this is also one of the great examples. If we see during the Indian Renaissance, scientific ideas of maker of modern India, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, and Swami Vivekananda was opposed by people who romanticized Hindu society and refrained from bringing social reforms. People like Radha Kandev, they were opposing those ideas. However, the powerful ideas of Swami Vivekananda triumphed over the romantic ideas of Radha Kandev or any other such person. During Cold War, we see the triumph of US over USSR. USSR was more based on romantic ideas of Marxian ideology. However, USA was more scientific in its approach. They were using the trade ties. They were reducing the state's role. They were giving more freedom. They were more uh, into the scientific innovation through more investment. However, the approach of USSR was more romantic in nature. The Indo-China 1962 war, our honorable Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, was of the view that we can become the ruler of this world without having powerful army, but having an approach of Buddha's Dhamma to become a world philosopher. However, China was more realist in approach, more scientific in its approach. They were building the army, they were building the intelligence system, and they triumphed over India in the 1962, and which uh, led to rethinking of India's strategy and research analysis wing, and many such things came into being after the 1962 war. And there are such numerous dimensions which you can explore. So I have given a rough idea. In conclusion, what we can write in conclusion. Conclusion should be forward looking. So this shows the importance of being scientific to solve the pressing problems of the modern times, whether it is environmental degradation, whether it is poverty, inequality. We need to have scientific temper to solve this problem. Countries like China adopted scientific method to reduce poverty. Nordic countries are utilizing advanced technology to conserve environment. So this is an important lesson which can be learned by our leaders and all the other people of our society. If we want to solve the modern problems, we need to be scientific in approach and to break these dogmas like honor killing. We need what we need. We need to have a scientific temper, which is written in the Indian Constitution, in the fundamental duties. You can mention this in the conclusion, and this will enhance your conclusion. So I think you would have got an idea that how to approach this essay. I will go towards the second essay. The second essay is telling that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. What they want to say that poets had an impact over the society which has changed the course of the history, but still having that kind of impact, they are not acknowledged enough. So I can write an introduction in this way that there is a famous saying that where the sun cannot reach, the poet will reach. Jahan na jaye Ravi, wahan jaye Kavi. This is a famous Hindi saying. So that is poet imagines the world in a way which is distinctive, and poetry is an intuitive perception of the unseen. The things which are not seen by a common man, poets can imagine that. So, since the time immemorial, powerful thoughts of poets have created and recreated social thoughts and values. So, different kinds of social values which were existing at that point of time, poets tried to change that. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, he was the former president of India, he said that a poet interprets and lays bare the human heart and mind to his less gifted brothers and sisters, enabling them to see and know man's finer self at close quarters. So, what he want to tell is that common men could not think about the pressing problems or know themselves. Poets give a prism through which they can see the society, through which they can understand themselves better. So I can give different dimensions in the body, or you can take a temporal scale, or you can do some other kind of things as well. But as I want to explore another kind of method as well, so I won't take temporal scale this time. I will take a kind of pastel approach. So let's start with that. The English poet John Milton is a very famous poet. He wrote many poems about freedom and individuality, which helped inspire the American Revolution. So those poems were not only popular among fellow revolutionaries, but they also established Milton as an influential poet with beliefs worth believing in. So this was the power of a poet. Poets has challenged the dogmas and evils present in the society. In 1939, a young Jewish man named Abel Meropol wrote the poem Strange Fruit, which protested racism in America. Similarly, if we take the example of Indian society, poems of Kabir Das challenge the caste system and religious dogmas. His poem like "बुरा जो देखन में चला बुरा न मिलिया कोई," he want to teach that see inside yourself instead of criticizing others. Or his poem like मुझको कहाँ ढूंढे रे बंदे मैं तो तेरे पास में नाम है मंदिर नाम है मस्जिद ना काबे कैलाश में. That is why you are going to the temples and doing so many sacrifices. Instead, just sit down and give yourself time, meditate. You will see God within yourself. Everybody has God in its own self, in his own self. It in a manner it was also challenging the caste system, which was based on notion of purity and pollution. So poetry has also the potential to change political discourses. राष्ट्र कवि रामधारी सिंह दिनकर had written a poem सिंहासन खाली करो कि जनता आती है. So it was a thunderous reminder that in a democracy ultimate power lies with the people, we the people of India. So during Jayaprakash Narayan's call for total revolution, he read this poem that became a symbol of the power of people in Indian democracy. If we see, poets had also reflected the social and political context of that time. This was the reason that there was a system of court poet in the Indian history. We had different court poets, like Kalidasa was a court poet, or Ravi Kirti was a court poet. They had written at length about the social milieu of that time through their powerful words. Now, poets have also inspired freedom struggle across the world, not only India, but across the world they had inspired. So during Indian freedom struggle, poems of Qazi Nazrul Islam or Muhammad Iqbal, सारे जहाँ से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा, और हसरत मोहानी जय हिंद, or Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore's poems instilled wave of nationalism across the masses. Freedom fighters of India like Shahid Azam Bhagat Singh was himself a poet. कुछ इस तरह से वाकिफ है मेरी कलम कि मैं इश्क भी लिखना चाहूँ तो इनकलाब लिख जाता है. This was one of the poem. His writings inspired thousands of youth to fight not only for the freedom struggle but after independence to fight against injustice. If a protest happens anywhere, you can see his writings, his people wearing his t-shirts, his powerful thoughts are still alive. Poets have also vouched for inclusive development when state failed to do so. When India became independent, we had thought about eradicating poverty, having inclusive development, Gandhian idea of Gram Swaraj, but it was not happening at that speed which was desirable or which was anticipated. So poet दुष्यंत कुमार had written, कहाँ तो तय था चरागां हर एक घर के लिए, कहाँ चराग मयस्सर नहीं शहर के लिए. That is what you had talked, that there will be so much of prosperity, so much of infrastructure, so much of the facilities, but on ground there is hardly anything. And he had talked about the poverty. कहाँ तो ना हो कमीज तो घुटनों से पेट ढक लेंगे, ये लोग कितने मुनासिब हैं इस सफर के लिए. That is, the poor people do not have even clothes to wear, and they are using their legs to cover their body to sleep at night in on the roads. So he was trying to talk about non-fulfillment of commitment to provide basic necessities to the poor section of the society. This helped in a way to make citizens aware about their rights, and Indian state also later started working on this. So many schemes were later were coming. Even in the present times, when a protest is launched, recently farmers protest, famous poem of Dushyant Kumar, which loosely means insurmountable like the Himalayas is now our sorrow. Let it melt like the Ganges, and through these mountains burrow. हो गई है पीर पर्वत सी पिघलनी चाहिए इस हिमालय से कोई गंगा निकलनी चाहिए. This is one of the famous poem. To bring change and protest against the decision of state, this poem is used, and in many of the protests we can observe this. In the farmers' agitation, many poems were written to support the cause. Poet Sugata Kumari, she recently died, inspired environmental conservation through her poem, and she forced some of her long-time critics to find merit in her passionate arguments for conserving environment. So many of the poems were written about the beauty of the nature, and also they inspired the love for nature. Whoever read these poems, poets often talk about beauty of nature, instill the importance of environment in the minds of people. They also talk about the rights of labor, rights of downtrodden people, rights of women. There was a poem which was titled "Neve Keet," that talked about the importance of foundation, that talked about the importance of the work of laborers. Similarly, there were many feminist poets who had written a lot of poems which instilled confidence among women across the world. We can talk about that as well. So there are different dimensions which you can explore. In conclusion, you can show the paradox that their contribution is immense, but they are unacknowledged. We still think that sword is mightier than the pen, but it is not the case. If we look the history of our times, we can see that the long-lasting impact of the pen was more than the sword. Also, the most powerful of the kingdoms was shackled by the writings of poems, the powerful words of the poet. So also in modern times, when everything has come on the internet, reading books have become very less. The poetry blogs, the social media, the posting of their launching of apps like Miraki and different other platforms are making this tool as powerful as it was before. So, poet's power has not declined as such. If you see the Anna Hazare movement, and in that the poems of Kumar Viswas, he used to recite poems, and that used to instill a kind of a wave of confidence, a wave of excitement among the masses to go and to fight against policies of state or to pressurize the state. Um, so this is the impact of a poet. However, the impact is mightier, but it remains unacknowledged. You have to showcase that the credit that poets deserve across the world, they are not given that. This is also very important to showcase that, because the title is not only talking about their contribution as legislators, but it is also talking that they are unacknowledged. So you have to show this in your essay through a complete stanza, or you can also inculcate in every paragraph, every two, three paragraph, this kind of paradox which is happening. So this is the way you can approach these two essays. I hope this will help you. I will come with more lectures, and sir will also upload many other lectures. Thank you so much.